We're in a remarkable place. We can learn a lot in this small workshop on a side street in Varanasi. We have underway here silk weaving in this workshop with these several power looms. And the history of what this represents, the history of the silk industry and silk trade, and similar industry and trade in cottons, helps us to understand the whole world economy. In fact, silk and cotton have been key to all stages of globalization except the first, except the Paleolithic era. From the Neolithic onward, from the beginning of agriculture, societies have sought ways to clothe themselves, to make textiles, to find the fibers that can be woven into clothing. And three kinds of solutions have been part of human history for the last 10,000 years. One kind of fiber is from the fleece of sheep and goats and other animals who are shorn, and then the fleece is made into wool. And woolen textiles have, of course, been one of the solutions for clothing throughout human history. A second solution has come from fibrous plants. Many kinds of plants can be made into strong fibers that then can be woven into fabrics. Flax is one example, which is made into linens. Hemp is another plant which can be turned into fibers that can then be woven. And the most important of all of these fibrous plants is cotton. Cotton has played an enormous role, of course, in textile production, but also in trade, in industry, in globalization. A third kind of solution is a little bit more surprising, and that is fibers from insects. Insects of a certain kind, the order Lepidoptera, which we know as moths and butterflies, produce larvae. Those larvae make cocoons in which they metamorphose into moths and butterflies. And those cocoons are a protein, fibroin, which itself is a fiber that can be woven into fabrics. In fact, perhaps the world's most luxurious fabric, silk. Well, woolen textiles date back at least 8,000 years, if not earlier. Cotton and silk, while the origins of these are not precisely known, also date back several thousand years. And in India, the story of both cottons and silks has been central for the history of India and, in fact, for the history of globalization and the world. Let me start with cotton. One can tell the story of the world economy from the perspective of cotton. So important has it been in global production, in manufacturing, in employment, and in global trade. Cotton, from a variety of cotton species, was discovered or invented for human use several times independently. Cotton is found in the ancient civilizations of the Indus Valley in ancient India. Cotton is found in the ancient civilizations of Peru. Cotton was developed for weaving in the ancient civilizations of the Kush in East Africa, in modern-day Sudan. So cotton, like agriculture in general, had several independent discoveries and produced independent industries in different parts of the world. Of course, the story of globalization is how those discoveries spread throughout the world, both the production itself of cotton as well as the international trade in cotton. When Alexander the Great came with the Macedonian army all the way to the Indus, reaching from the Mediterranean all the way to the Asian subcontinent, it is said that for the first time, he and his soldiers found cotton textiles. It was only in the Asian expeditions that the Greeks learned about cotton. They came with heavy woolens and they exchanged them for the light garments suitable for the subtropics and the tropics of the Indian subcontinent, and discovered the pleasures and the joys of cotton. Cotton growing became a core part of Indian civilization throughout the Indo-Gangetic plains, and especially in the Indus River Valley, and then in parts of more tropical and subtropical southern India in the Deccan Plateau. India became a massive center of cotton production, and Indian cottons were prized around the world. The Mughal emperors who first conquered the northern parts of India, the Gangetic Plains, in 1526, developed a very modern and sophisticated cotton industry in India, built up massive cotton trade, and cotton was one of the most prized possessions of the Europeans who came to India for trade, later for plunder and conquest, but they came in part in search of the cotton trade. It's said in the 16th and 17th centuries that the East India Company, which arrived in India in the first years of the 17th century, that is, the first years of the 1600s, became the major British trader of cottons, and cotton imports into Britain soared in the 17th century and in the 18th century, and 95% of those cotton textiles came from India, came from Mughal India, with a great center exactly where we are now in Varanasi. This is one of the centers of the Mughal cotton industry. And Indian cottons were prized for their designs, for their colored prints, for their fine muslins, for their rougher and cheaper calicos. But all forms of Indian cotton textiles played an enormous role in Britain's desire for trade with India and for Britain's desire to unlock the secrets of India's vast textile industry. It's estimated that in the 17th century and in the 18th century, India commanded perhaps 1/4 of the world trade in textiles and in cotton goods, prized, enormously valuable, sought after throughout Europe. Now, in the 18th century, Britain got the idea that Britain needed to develop its own textile industry, its own cotton industry, not growing the cotton, but processing the raw cotton and weaving it into cotton textiles. And therein lies a great deal of modern economic history, a history of the age of oceanic empire, because Britain began to conquer militarily more and more of the Indian subcontinent in the 18th century, in the 1700s, and conquer it by this quasi-semi-private company, the East India Company, with its own army, its own rules, its own reckless greed. But back in Britain, the British early entrepreneurs decided that they would go after the production of cotton textiles themselves. Of course, they did it not in a rule-based system, but started with protectionism to block India's exports to Britain in the 1800s, starting in 1700 with the Calico Act, which meant to stop the importation of Indian calicos into Britain. During the 18th century, trade was not stopped entirely, but it was impeded. That's the rule-based order. If you are in charge, you set the rules. And Britain was setting the rules, trying to break the Indian trade, both by controlling the ports and the markets in India itself increasingly, and by blocking the importation of Indian goods into Britain. During the 18th century, under this protectionist system, came the first stages of the Industrial Revolution. Why this place is also so notable. If we were standing here 300 years ago, we would not see these power looms, these machine looms. We would see hand weavers. We would see a weaver on each side of the warp of the fabric being woven, and they would be sending the shuttle back and forth to create the weft that would knit the warp and the weft together into the cotton fabric. It was done by hand, and there were millions of Indians in the subcontinent employed in growing cotton, in spinning cotton, in taking the seeds from the cotton, now done mechanically, but then done by hand, then in spinning the cotton into the yarns, and then in the weaving of the cotton. In the 18th century, the 1700s in Britain, each of these processes became increasingly mechanized. In 1733, John Kay introduced what's called the flying shuttle. Rather than one weaver on each side pushing the shuttle to the counterpart, mechanically one shuttle would come back and forth through a mechanized process. In the following decades, the spinning of the cotton was mechanized into spinning jennies and spinning mules. And an absolutely decisive event, one of the decisive events of human history, took place at the end of the 1700s, the end of the 18th century. Remember that in 1776, James Watt, the mechanic and inventor working at the University of Glasgow, improved on the steam engine by introducing a separate condenser, and dramatically improved the efficiency of John Newcomen's steam engine from the early 1700s, and really made the invention that transformed the world through steam-based or fossil fuel-based industrialization. Well, that was 1776, traditionally dated, but generally in the 1770s, that Watt's steam engine came to fruition, came to production, and already by the 1790s, the mechanized loom was attached to the steam engine. And one could say the rest is history. That mechanization of the ginning process, of the spinning process, of the weaving process, of the power loom of a kind that we see here today, but would have been a hand loom at the time of Watt's discovery, made possible the vast expansion of production of textiles and textile production and trade under the control of the British Empire. So the British Empire, through its protectionism in the 18th century, its inventions, the development of the steam engine, by the 19th century became the world's leading textile producer. And therein is the source of the great satanic mills, as was named by William Blake, the fiery towers of the factories of the Midlands of England, of Lancashire, of Manchester, of Liverpool, where great industrial plants went up to produce industrial cotton textiles. And these were built on child and women's labor. The brutal early days of industrialization that was depicted by Friedrich Engels, and then together with his colleague Karl Marx in describing the brutalities of early factory capitalism. But this massive expansion of low-cost textiles in Britain destroyed the traditional industry in India, left unemployed millions of spinners and weavers in India. It led to an insatiable growth in Britain for the raw material, but not for the wondrous textiles produced by the skilled artisans of the Mughal Empire. It meant a huge decline, a deindustrialization of India in the 19th century, India turning into a source of raw materials and becoming an importer of cotton textiles in the 19th century. Well, that insatiable demand for raw cotton is a history in and of itself. We know it in the United States because as these factory mills in Britain demanded more and more raw cotton, cotton became king in the American South, grown and processed and picked by slaves. So the American slave economy, this disaster of America, this original sin of America, was built as part of the global industry of mechanized cotton textiles under the British control in the 19th century. In India, with the expansion of raw cotton production, while some power mills were allowed at the middle and end of the 19th century, India remained a net importer of cotton goods. India, by 1858, had completely been swallowed up by Britain, first by the East India Company, and then, as of 1858, by the British state itself, creating the British Raj in India. In the latter part of the 19th century, there were several disasters in agriculture in India, also under the British direction and rule. Indians were shifted from growing foodstuffs to growing cotton and other raw materials desired by the voracious factories of Britain. And in that process came three major El Nino events, each one associated decade after decade after decade, 3 times with massive crop failures, and under the cruelty of British ideology, free market, don't interfere. In each of these famines, millions of Indians died, perished of starvation, because the British could not find the way to provide emergency food, even sometimes shipping food out of the famine regions because the locals couldn't afford the foodstuffs. And so what food there was shipped out by British merchants. These more recently, in a remarkable book by Mike Davis, have been labeled the late Victorian Holocausts. In the 20th century, British textiles went into decline, and from the mid-20th century onward, there has been a resurgence of the cotton textile industry in Asia, in China, in Bangladesh, in India, in Pakistan. So once again, at the end of the 20th century, Asia is once again the predominant source of world textile exports in cotton. We say in the West, rather ahistorically, that the West has experienced a deindustrialization. And where did those Asian textile manufacturers come from? They took our jobs, without understanding how recently the reverse was exactly the case, how British protectionism had broken the back of the Indian textile industry, of how the British Raj really prevented the industrialization of India until the 20th century. And so what has happened is not taking away jobs in some unprecedented way. It is a return to a long pattern of world history, to the more usual pattern of global trade in cotton textiles.